Hi, everyone. This is Coach Lisa, and I am here today to talk about 5 ways to measure your breathing. And this is an informal discussion, and I want to start out, especially with the Tranquil Breath Tribe, with informal ways of measuring your breath. So we don't get hung up on small subtleties, small differences. Let's talk about big ways, gross ways, really conventional, it's not perfect, but it's easy ways to measure your breathing. So I am going to bring up my screen. So we've got some visuals. All right, so let's get started here. 5 ways to track your breathing. And, why do we want to do this? Because what gets measured gets improved. A lot of times people don't continue with breathing training because they can't see any results. It's not even sometimes that they're not getting results, but you know how sometimes if you're in pain and once the pain goes away, you don't remember the pain. So once we're breathing better, we don't necessarily recognize that, yeah, this wasn't happening before. So it's really nice to start tracking your breathing. And so we're going to talk about ways to do it. And another thing is, our breathing isn't meant to be visible to us, right? When we're breathing well, we're not thinking about it at all. It's just happening. We're like the fish in water. We don't realize that we're in air, that we're breathing air. And so anyway, that's how we're going to handle this. So let's get moving. Hold on, let me get things set up here. Okay, so what is breathing fitness? So the definition of breathing fitness is that you're breathing well in everything that you're doing, and you're literally not thinking about it. You're just being. You're not doing. So informally, as it says here, what's breathing fitness? Well, you're breathing, you're living your life, you're comfortable, you're not thinking about your breathing. And this is happening in whatever you do. You're climbing up a mountain, you're not thinking about your breathing, even though it's a challenging walk. But you've got enough air, you're breathing comfortably, you're not huffing and puffing, you're not feeling winded. Same thing with sports, and same thing with talking. Before I did breathing training, I would read stories to my daughter, and I would be really winded and uncomfortable after like a half hour of nighttime storytelling. And that's because I wasn't breathing well. Talking can be demanding for our breathing. We'll talk about that in another session. So technically, how breathing experts, right, like in a laboratory, might assess your breathing is how long you can hold your breath comfortably. But there are so many refinements and ways to, how do I want to say this? Nobody knows if you're breathing comfortably but you. So, it's not really something that somebody can adjust for in a lab. So it's not to say that that measurement isn't valuable, but it's most valuable when an individual is doing it regularly and they are doing it the same way every time. It's kind of like when you weigh yourself, when you weigh your body, right? Ideally, you do it same day of the week, once a week, wearing the same clothes at the same time, right? Because there are fluctuations, right? So you try and minimize that. Well, it's the same with official breathing measurement. So today we're going to talk about ad hoc ways to do it, ways so that it's good enough that you can see that you're making progress. Okay, so first off, I want to say, what are some pre-actions just to make sure that breathing training is okay for you at the get-go? Well, first of all, you want to rule out serious contraindicated medical conditions. And here's a link from the Breathing Retraining Center website. So why is this important? Because if you, God forbid, had lung cancer or something, there might be obstructions in your lungs to breathing. There are illnesses where you may be breathing heavy because that's your only option. And so we don't want to do an overlay of what is correct breathing for healthy people if for some reason you're not healthy in that way. Okay. Another thing is this Rosenthal test. This is something that ear, nose, and throat doctors do. You want to make sure that even if it's uncomfortable at this point because you're not used to it, that you can take either 20 breaths with your nose, or you can breathe with your nose for a minute. If you have polyps or something in your nose and, something where there's a physical obstruction, you need to know that. So you're not feeling like, oh my goodness, I can't do this. Well, there's a physical reason. So it's always good to get yourself checked out if you think that there is a problem. Okay, so let's get into the 5 ways to measure your breathing. So we're going to talk about the pulse and the heart rate. I think this is one of the best ways to do it when you're starting out. It's because it's easy to take your pulse, especially with these tools we're going to talk about. The pulse is an indicator of your breathing comfort and ease and your relaxation level. And it's just super easy. Okay. Another thing we're going to talk about is dry mouth. Hi, Marissa. I can see you're here. All right. Good. Let me know if you have any questions. I think you're able to unmute yourself. So let me know if not. In fact, I'm going to open up my own chat here.
Yes,
All
hi
right.
there.
Okay, hi. Okay, good. So I know you can reach out if you need to. Okay. So we're going to talk about the pulse. I think that's the just easiest, most accessible way to do things. Dry mouth in the morning. And then 3, 4, and 5 are a little bit more exacting, but you got to be careful that your attitude is right. Okay. Because 3, 4, and 5, people can get into the nitty-gritty and just kind of obsess, right? So that's one of the reasons I like 1 and 2. It's real simple. Okay. All right. So what have you noticed is the relationship between your pulse and breathing? Have you noticed that there is a relationship? Because there is. And if you want to stay silent, if you want to answer the question, it's all good. But the relationship, it's just, let's just say that there is a relationship. The pulse rate, if you notice, it's just so you know, like the pulse rate, just like our breathing changes at every moment based on how much energy we need, how stressed we are. All these measurements that we're going to take, there is not one good measurement. It all depends on what's going on for you right now. I remember I started this years ago when my daughter was like in elementary school. And oh man, I was measuring my breathing all the time. Well, my breathing stats were a function of how relaxed I was. And boy, was I relaxed after I got her to school, and then I would be doing things at my own pace. And then I would notice my stress went up as it was about time because I was a single working mom. So my stress went up, had to get things done before I picked her up. And so it's just natural. So, as our stress goes up and down, so does our pulse, so does our breathing rate. So again, when you start taking these statistics, you just want to know that. So it's not an absolute number. We do have a resting heart rate, right? That we get through our exercise, that we can say, okay, in general, when I wake up in the morning, a lot of times that is the best thing. That is the best time to take any of these rates, right? A lot of us weigh ourselves in the morning. You can take your resting pulse rate in the morning. And when we talk about doing the control pause, right? The comfort pause, many different ways to call that holding your breath test. But that we recommend in the morning. That is the most neutral time to, it seems like, to take any measurement because it's the most natural. So anyway, so the pulse is a measurement of the heart rate so anyway, the pulse is a statistic that can also measure our stress. And like I said, I think it's a stand-in for a lot of these breathing assessments. Okay. And, the reason is, when you're exercising, remember that how much air we need, the breathing is a result. We're not stockpiling oxygen. Our body takes in the oxygen we need to transform the energy, right? The food, the glucose, however we're doing it, ketos a whole different way. But long story short, oxygen is needed to maximize the conversion of, the stored food or active food to energy. So the more energy we need, the more we're going to be breathing. That's natural. So when we exercise, we breathe more. And so that's just true. So it's nice to do relaxed breathing after exercise to bring it down. So what we're going to do is, in general, in fact, there's an article on the Breathing Retraining Center blog on how to do this just after you exercise, how to bring your pulse back down. Okay, so that's just good to know that, you can see that our breathing gets heavier when we exercise, our pulse gets higher when we exercise, and we want to bring it back down. And the same is true when we get upset, right? So we can need more air for physical reasons or emotional reasons. And, thinking takes about 20% of our energy, right? So it all factors into it. Okay. So relaxation, right? Relaxation affects on breathing, right? So when we relax more, that lowers our respiration rate. We're going to talk about that later. Lowers our pulse, less air volume per breath, less mouth breathing. So when we're exercising, our breathing is naturally getting worked up, and then so we can take our pulse at any time, and we'll see, what our pulse is. And then as we do relaxed breathing, we take it back down. Okay. So anyway, so what this is all about is to start taking your pulse as an indicator of how's my breathing doing. So maybe you would take your pulse, when you first wake up in the morning as to get to know, what is your resting pulse rate? What's my pulse when I'm relaxed, right? That's really the question. When I'm feeling good, after I've meditated, in the morning when I wake up and I haven't started thinking about what I need to do yet, what's my pulse? So you can get to know that number, right? And then as you exercise or you get emotionally wound up, again, you can always take your pulse, and it's a very neutral number, and we're not really controlling the number. That's what's nice about the pulse, as opposed to some of these other official ways to measure your breathing. As soon as we start thinking about our breathing and that we're measuring it, right? It's just like anything. It's just like when you pass a window and you want to look at your best self, you do whatever you do, you show your right side. It's the same thing with your breathing, that when you're measuring it, you're on your best behavior, So anyway, so that's good, right? Because we want to breathe well. If we have been breathing in an unhealthy way, we want to get it back, but we also want to know, like, what is the truth too of our breathing state. So anyway, I just wanted to show you how you can use your pulse to breathe better. And in fact, like I said, there's an article on the blog, and here in, one slide, how can we get our breathing back to normal when we're worked up, either because we've been physically worked up, right? We've been exercising. I walked to the top of the hill, then I walked down, or I'm really upset, or I'm feeling anxious about something. How can we relax our breathing? Well, you can just know that you're breathing more gently, right? We all know when we're calm. So you can also do an official relaxed breathing exercise. And here at Breathing Retraining Center and the Relaxed, the Tranquil Breath Tribe, I've talked about 3 ways to do it. There's obviously many ways to do it, but those 3 ways are just 3 different ways that I've chosen that I think are super effective. But nothing is mutually exclusive, right? It's just, you got to pick something and go with it. Also, if you can imagine, if you breathe and then hold your breath for a second every couple breaths or after every breath, that's also a way of just calming down. And I really encourage you to take your pulse regularly to note patterns and differences. These are the 3 relaxed breathing exercises that we talk about. Exhale longer is an old, Indian sage way. You know how the yogis are just breathing masters. And it's just known that when you exhale longer, it's calming and relaxing. And when you inhale more, that's the fire breath and the way they talk about getting more spiritual, but it's exciting your breathing. So if your issue is dysfunctional breathing, hyperventilation, you want to stay away from that and you want to do this exhale longer. Another idea is the imagery of breathing 1% less. And then the last technique is where you're just moving your body less. And that's another assessment you can make. How can I hear my breathing and how much am I moving when I breathe? Okay, so just another way to use your pulse to breathe better is, and this is in that blog article I was mentioning, what you can do is take your pulse before you exercise, and then just for fun, you can take your pulse at the peak of exercising and see how high it is. And then you can take your pulse when you finish exercising, and then as you leave your exercise site or you just start, you can see how long does it take to get back to your own relaxed normal. And this is true with emotions too, right? If you're worked up, if you're worried about something, you'll see that your pulse goes up, your breathing is not as it's just more labored, right? And I've got videos. I think, I've got them on the blog and at the Tranquil Breath Tribe, just some clips of people who are worked up. You can see them breathing, okay? So we can also do these things for emotional reasons. So you take your pulse. If it's higher than your usual resting rates, you can do breathing exercises or calming activities to bring it down. And not just these breathing calming activities, right? Anything that you might do to calm yourself down. I haven't done this. I can't remember the last time I actually had a professional massage, but I'm sure I'm calmer at the end of that. So it's not just conventional breathing exercises, it's anything you might do. Okay, so now easy ways to take your pulse. It has never been easier, right? I never really got into this type of thing and, where's my, where is the blood vessel and all that stuff. And then you still need some timepiece, right, to time it. So we've got Heart Rate Pulse, Heart Rate Pro. That's my app of choice, but there must be about 50 of them. And of course, if you have a sports watch, it's probably built in there. But just the idea that all you need to do, okay, I'm not seeing because I've got this up, but as it shows you, you just put your finger over the camera lens and it will tell you what your pulse is. And I know that you can do that for free on most of these apps. What you're paying for, I think I paid $3.99 or something a couple years ago. What I'm paying for the app is to see the historical record of where my pulse is. So that's kind of fun. So when I talk about taking my pulse before I exercise and then at the peak, right? Because I'm either walking up a hill or I'm on a treadmill. And there's, some sort of peak. So I'm taking it at the peak and then maybe at the end of the workout. And then what I would do is, do a couple minutes of exercise, breathing, calming exercises if I could. And, I would do those calming exercises in the shower. And, I don't always get it down there, and that's okay. Maybe I had an appointment then, but I would check before lunch. What's my pulse again? So you can really use this to be helpful. Now, okay, so I've got the app here on the left. Then I've got the pulse oximeter, right? And these were really popularized during the pandemic. But you know what the difference there is that you stick your finger in and you can see your pulse live. And what's neat about that is you can do a breathing calming exercise and prove to yourself that that lowers your pulse because, yeah, it just does. So you can see your pulse go up and down live. You know, think a scary thought, your pulse goes up. Do a breathing calming exercise or hold your breath, and you can see that your pulse goes down. So that is again that's that I don't think that's as practical as the phone app, but I think it will anybody who wants who says like prove it that this is helpful, that is the tool to do it. Okay. All right. So any questions about taking the pulse? Let me just take a pause there. All right. Well, ask questions at any time. I'm going to move on. Okay. Another way to assess how's my breathing, just, again, a very ad hoc, basic thought is how does your mouth feel when you wake up? If it's dry, then you're probably snoring or your mouth's open when you're asleep. So that's a good way to just assess how's my breathing. And I have used that at times. I've probably been doing this 13 years, 14 years. And you know what? My life, things go up and they go down, right? So, like everybody, situations come up, life is harder. And so I have seen at times, oh, wow, I'm waking up and yeah, my mouth's a little bit dry. What's going on with me? A lot of times it's not so much that I think, so my breathing sometimes tells me I've got a problem, not the other way around, where I know I have a problem. And, in other words, I'm not thinking about my breathing, but sometimes if I just notice these breathing signs, I'm like, oh, yeah, that really does bother me. Yeah. I'm not thinking about it like that, but look how my breathing is deteriorating. And so this is another way, a very everyday, not technical way of identifying how's my breathing. And in another time, I'll talk about what's normal breathing, what's considered more dysfunctional breathing. And we'll talk about, mouth breathing and tests and stuff like that. And kind of surreptitious mouth breathing. There's all sorts of ways people mouth breathe and don't realize it. And, we have to take notice and we have to stop. I think there's a lot of pretending in the breathing community. Like I'm going to pretend I'm not mouth breathing. And, I've got a slide where most people, especially in this culture and the stress right now, mouth breathing is stress breathing. So if you're under stress, you're going to be having a certain percentage of mouth breathing. And so anyway, we can't say, oh, I shouldn't be mouth breathing. I'm going to pretend that I'm not. Many of us, most of us are. In fact, Patrick McKeown, who wrote Oxygen Advantage, I just saw something on YouTube he put out with his own control pause, which he said was 32. And, a lot of the Russians would say, oh, why is he even teaching? And, the truth is that the guy has a business. The guy has an international business. He's in Ireland. I've been reading about what's going on there politically. The guy's got a lot to feel stress over. So if we're not yogis living on the mountain, right, then we're going to have a certain amount of stress. And the wonderful thing is that we can monitor it. We've got all sorts of skills to work with it when we are feeling some anxiety or, we're feeling just the wonderful thing about our breathing is our breathing tells us really holistically how we're doing. We could have an infection or be getting a cold. our breathing tells us a couple days before we have any other symptoms. If we work with these statistics and you log them, you'll see that a couple days before you actively get a cold, your breathing is showing that you're starting to have some deficiencies, some problems. So if you rest there, that's, you can help yourself out. Okay. Now, another thing that we do is we can assess, starting out, how long can you comfortably breathe with your nose? Sedentary, right? That just means sitting here, right? And you have to make sure that your mouth's totally closed, right? You have to have a lip seal when you're doing this. But, you can just start your stopwatch and basically breathe with your nose and see how long it's comfortable. And when it stops being comfortable, look at your clock, right? Turn the stopwatch off and see how much time has elapsed. And same thing when you're active. Now, the nice thing about these just general informal assessments is, like when you're active, do what you do, whether it's cycling or walking, or something that sometimes I do with people is, just jumping jacks. How many jumping jacks can you do comfortably with your nose before you have to stop? That's a very, again, objective way. You can always retest yourself by doing jumping jacks. So I guess what I'm saying is there's no right way to do it, which I really like about these informal assessments. But just the idea, how long can you do it nasal breathing? Because a lot of our exercises, when we do the relaxed breathing exercises, remember the exhale longer or the 1% less or the not moving so much, you can do those nose breathing or mouth breathing, right? And ideally, if you're mouth breathing, you start mouth breathing less, as you practice. I talk a lot about, thinking about the straw. Like, if you're mouth breathing, is it a garden hose that you've got? Or is it a boba straw or a Coke straw or a coffee stir, right? So in other words, let's not demonize mouth breathing when we're starting out, but let's just assess, can you reduce the mouth breathing, right? So this dare I call it test, or just, number that you would take is, well, how long can I just nose breathe? And that can be something that you can see the number growing as you do breathing training. So I think that's really valuable, both sedentary and active. And if you're doing your breathing exercises regularly, you'll see that you can do more jumping jacks over time. So it is valid. So what you can do is, so like anything, and I think breathing training is a lot like strength training, where you find your edge and then you keep doing it at that point, and then it gets easier. So what you can do is, like, even your sedentary breathing. Okay, so you can say, okay, so you're doing various things to train your breathing. And one of them is that, once you do this originally and you say, okay, I can breathe comfortably 2 minutes sedentary. That's where a lot of people start out. After 2 minutes, I start feeling uncomfortable. I really want to open my mouth. So, okay, you got 2 minutes. So next time, set your clock for 2 minutes the next day, breathe with your nose, and then after some time, move it to 2 minutes, 10 seconds, right? So that's what I mean about making a plan to grow this number on a weekly basis. And that's the same thing you would do with strength training, right? After, 3 sets of 5 pounds is easy, you either add, increase your reps, or you go to 8 pounds, right? So it's the same thing here. Okay. All right. And I just talked about this. Regular mouth breathers, make a plan to breathe less with your mouth instead of focusing on nasal breathing. That's really important, right? We don't want to demonize mouth breathing to the point where people are not real about how much they are mouth breathing. Because remember, we can reduce our mouth breathing. Our mouth is so much bigger than our nose, right? That's a huge opening, right? Compared to these 2 little nostrils. right? So we can focus on, oh, can I breathe more gently with my mouth? Can I hear myself breathing less? The idea of how big is the opening. Well, if you keep the imagery of, the whatever, the size of your mouth that you're breathing through getting smaller and smaller and smaller, at a certain point, the size of the mouth is going to go to the size of the nostrils, right? And then you can transfer over more easily. But anyway, yeah. So there is a way, that you can rely on to systematically mouth breathe less. Okay, this is the official time that people take. This is the Buteyko control pause, or Tess Graham, a very eminent, one of the oldest and most senior teachers of breathing training, also a physical therapist, calls it a comfort pause. Patrick McEwen, Oxygen Advantage, calls it the Bolt pause. Bolt, can't remember what Bolt stands for, but people have different names for it. And the idea is that you hold your breath for a comfortable period. And then, as you can see in this image, after you hold your breath, you're not gasping. So this is hard to do, and people have a lot of questions about it. And there's a lot of questions that come up about carbon dioxide and oxygen. And that's good when people have been doing this a long time. But sometimes I feel, and I'm not the only one, that sometimes people can get so concerned about this number that they want it to increase, that they make it increase. In other words, they hold too long, or there are just many ways to try and, it's kind of like when you're on a diet and you really want to show that you're losing weight. So, the day before you weigh, you stop drinking as much. You know what I mean? That's not really reflecting the accurate weight. And people can play games with this also, going more comfortable than they should. So, yeah, there's a lot of, not official manipulation, right? But just, we're always trying to feel better about things. And if it's not always going up, we feel bad. And like I said, all these numbers are going up and down based on our emotional state, our physical state, even if you have an infection. If you're getting a cavity, your breath hold time is going to go down. This basically reflects, everything that is going on with you, your breathing rate. So anyway, that's why I feel like, especially for beginners or people who are just learning this, the pulse is just so much more neutral. Most of us cannot really manipulate our pulse. I mean, I guess you can by relaxing more, but that's the point, right? Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about the breath hold time. There is a lot that is out there in the literature, and this is like the official way to do it. Okay, I also want to talk about the respiration rate, not because we focus on it. In fact, every training I've ever done, they've said that we don't really want to manipulate our respiration rate. The problem with breathing training is that sometimes people get obsessed with it and they do it too much. And we're breathing all the time, right? We're breathing 20,000 times a day. So we don't really want to be focusing on our breathing because that is also kind of inserting into the pattern something dysfunctional, right? So what we want to do is do breathing, some breathing training activity to breathe differently, to breathe in a more relaxed way. We never want to do that for more than 20 minutes at a time. And even 5 or 10 minutes is fine, because what we are wanting to do is kind of inspire our respiratory system to see that, oh yeah, there's a better way, to pick up the changes that we're making. So anyway, my understanding is we are not really trying to manipulate our respiration rate. But it is interesting that I broke my arm in December, or I should say I fractured it. I never was wearing a hard cast. But anyway, I did go to urgent care, right? I had an accident at the gym. So I went to urgent care and they took my respiration rate and it was higher than usual. And then I went back a week later, they took it again. In fact, I have seen a statistic that something like 85–90% of people in the emergency room are hyperventilating. And I mean, I get it, right? That's a stressful place to be. And as it was, I had that accident and, I just last week started driving again. So it was very stressful. I'm sure I was in shock. My respiration rate was high. So I think it's important to note that respiration rate is something that the medical community uses. And I was actually surprised that they took that along with my pulse. They took my respiration rate. Anytime you go to the doctor, right, they weigh you, they take these basic tests, and they also noted my respiration rate. So I definitely wanted to include this and say that in general, there is what is considered a normal has changed. I have other presentations where I take some statistics about how what's normal in breathing has changed. After World War II, I think what happened is as there was more affluence in the Western world, people's breathing went down, because breathing skill is also a function of having a lot of good exercise. In fact, when you really want to improve your breathing, you really have to exercise more. And I've seen studies on that. So, long story short, as we are more sedentary as a culture, and everybody's more sedentary, right? I mean, we're not walking to the stream to get our water. Even a couple hundred years ago, people might have been walking 15 miles a day just in the normal just doing their normal activities. So we are definitely not as in shape as our forebears, and that affects our respiration rate. And so even what was, what pre-World War II, people were breathing a lot more efficiently than they do now. So I'm not even sure I could say what's normal, but I know that, it used to be like 8 to 10 breaths per minute. Now the medical community may be talking about like 10 to 14, and like mine at the hospital was 16. And if you look at, is it resonant breathing? They talk about the optimal breaths, and this is, in a completely relaxed state, is like 6 breaths per minute. So again, you wouldn't want to try and manipulate yourself. You said, oh, I should be breathing at 6 breaths per minute at all times. No, well, after being in a meditation retreat for a week, yeah, maybe I can get there. But anyway, all these breathing rates, again, so I'm going to conclude here. Yeah, that's my last screen. All these breathing measurements, your breathing is changing minute to minute, just like your pulse is, just like your assessment of how your life is going is. So really, in any way where you're looking at your breathing, whatever statistic you're looking at, you have to be looking at, okay, this is generally where my breathing is after my exercise. So that's my after exercise breathing. This is my beginning of the day breathing. This is my breathing rate right before I go to sleep. And then you can think about that as those unique times in your life. And, think about it like that. Okay. So that is the end of my formal presentation. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my recording so I can, yeah.